Welcome to START Secondary Transition Team-Paced Resources and Training. This key component is on planning for integrated competitive employment. My name is Kelly Rogers, and in the next few minutes, I'll provide a brief overview on how to navigate this key component. Many of the concepts in this series have been rooted in the research and resources available from these organizations. And the work is founded in some big ideas. One is that though transition planning tends to start being discussed at school at the age of 14 with a transition plan required to be in place by the age of 16, we really encourage families to begin to explore the agencies and resources in their local area well before that. And as educators, we can help facilitate that conversation and that exploration. It's critical, of course, that educators of all youth, regardless of their skills and abilities, at least start forging those connections no later than the age of 14. Again, though we're not required to have the transition plan in place until age 16, it's critical if we want to get the outcomes that we're shooting for to do that work long before that. It's important, again, to recognize that not all students with autism will be eligible for adult agency support. And so their families need to have knowledge of what additional resources might be available to facilitate transition even within their local school districts. And ultimately, what we're aiming for is that students leave school with all the supports and services in place for them to be successful in the workplace or other post-secondary education setting, creating that seamless transition. The entire series is really founded on these two big concepts as well, that all decisions are informed by the law, the research, and the data. So just like talking previously about our requirement legally to have transition plans in place as 16, we also want to look at what is best practice, and best practice would be doing that work earlier than 16. But everything will be guided by what does the research say, what does the law say, and certainly for any individual student, what does the data say about what's being successful. And secondly, using that data to tell the story. That data doesn't have to be what we tend to think of as a bunch of numbers, but rather information that tells a story about the journey, about this particular student, that is going to help us in achieving high outcomes. This key component on integrated competitive employment is organized in 4 sections. Section 1 you're listening to now, which is just an overview. Section 2 is titled Looking at Autism Differently. And in that section, we're going to really look at the predispositions of many individuals with autism and how we can use those predispositions to improve employment. So that will include looking into theory of mind, high interest areas, making associations, and executive functioning. Attribution of behavior is more us as the folks supporting individuals with autism, and how we can relook at some of these predispositions in ways that helps improve those employment outcomes. In section 3, we're going to talk about our behavior as educators or families supporting students on the autism spectrum, and that having high expectations, which to do that requires presuming competence and having a perspective of dignity of risk. And doing those two things will help us keep those high expectations, which again, we know from the research correlates highly with high adult outcomes. In section 4, then, we'll drill down into the strategies that we can use inside of employment settings to ensure that students can access employment and sustain employment over time. So the 3 big areas that really are conditions for employment for many individuals on the autism spectrum are visual supports, self-management systems, and natural supports. Natural supports are really likened to, in school we call it peer-to-peer support, but in the work setting we will call those natural supports, and it's essentially using coworkers to help support the needs of students with autism in that employment setting. And then we'll discuss some other accommodations that are oftentimes beneficial. So the ultimate goal is that we ensure that students can achieve competitive integrated employment. And two main concepts inside that term, competitive integrated employment, are one, that students are working alongside individuals who do not have disabilities, and two, that they are receiving commensurate wage for that job. So at minimum wage, and then equal wage compared to what individuals without disabilities would be receiving for doing that same job. And both supported employment and customized employment can be used in order to achieve that competitive integrated employment. We're going to focus in this series a lot on the customized employment and the discovery process, which is an age-appropriate transition assessment that START uses, and there's a checklist that goes along with it, and you will be doing this process throughout the series with a selected student. And so this is just a visual of that actual process. It is titled V3 Discovery because you get the 3 V's out of it. So when you do the process, you're going to get a vocational profile, which really outlines the contributions and conditions for employment for that particular individual. You get information to inform the IEP. We call that the vision, but it really is all of the parts and pieces of the transition plan in the IEP. It will help inform that. And then you also develop, as part of the process, in collaboration with the individual, a visual resume. And that is the way that the individual is going to portray for a potential employer what contributions that they could make to that person's place of employment. And so the processes that you go through in order to get those outputs may include things that you're already doing. And so there is a records review. Of course, the records review and the interviews and staff input are very narrowed in the sense that there's certain questions that you're going to be asking that focuses a lot on what are this individual's contributions for employment, what are this individual's conditions for employment. So it's a little different than if you're already doing some records review or some interviews and staff input. They may be different questions than we typically ask. The process is heavily loaded in doing multiple observations in multiple different environments and activities in order to really drill down about what is this student's skills and potential contributions to employment. And then, of course, if you're doing any other assessment data already that will be helpful in outlining these 3 V's, that can certainly be included as part of this process as well. And finally, we want to make sure that we're always focused on families. That certainly the research shows that the more that families are involved in this process, the more likely we're going to achieve those outcomes. And so we like to have this guiding principle, which is families are the heart of the team, not just part of the team, that they are the pulse that keeps this team going. And that is a primary principle of the entire process and work that we do in the Building Your Future series. And so we hope that you enjoy the rest of the series. The next section you will do is the Looking at Autism Differently and begin the process of discovery. Thank you.